Hi, it's Penny here. Welcome to another reading vlog. This week I've decided I'm going to read a bunch of shorter books, mostly. I do have a longer audiobook I need to get to, but I also have a bunch of like graphic novels and a shorter book that I want to read, and on my iPad I've got some digital graphic novels from the library, so I thought we'd try to get to all of these this week, partly because I don't know if you can tell from my face, but I feel a little bit like shit, so getting into some shorter, easier books to read sounds perfect. Like just a little bit easier than taking on something big and chunky. Also, last week I read a bunch of big chunky books, and so, well, that was a lot for starters, but also I'm now like just keeping up with my Goodreads reading challenge, or like my general amount of books that I want to read this year. I'm just keeping up with it, and like that's kind of fine, but I would like to get a little bit ahead, partly because I secretly have a goal to read 50% more than that goal, like 150 books instead of 100 books. But also I think next week we're probably at the end of the week going to be going away, and I probably won't read much after that, so it would be nice to get ahead of things. I will say, of course, the number of books you read is purely a vanity metric. It doesn't matter, but I would just like to be ahead for the fun of it. I want to read all these small books for the fun of it, and like it would be nice to not have Goodreads constantly telling me that I'm behind. So let me tell you about the books that I'm going to read. Firstly, the non-graphic book I have is this one. So this is called, let me find it, Long Chills and Queso by Brandon Sanderson. So this is a little book that we got in the last secret project box that Brandon Sanderson was doing last year. It's a book, or like a short story novella type thing that he wrote quite a long time ago. Does it say when in here? No, because it's just published this year, but I think I read he wrote it in 2010. Am I making things up? Oh, early 2000s it says here actually. So I don't really know what it's about, but there is a picture in here of this woman like smoking, and up in the smoke is kind of like a circuit board type thing. So I'm guessing it's going to be like a dark detective story with some kind of sci-fi element. Hopefully though it'll be a nice quick read and hopefully good. As well, I did have, along with this, on my TBR for this week, for February, Road to Oz, which is a graphic novel I got for Christmas. So this is basically a retelling, a graphic novel adaptation of the third Wizard of Oz book. That might not be an accurate number, but editing Penny can correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, it's like a continuation of the Wizard of Oz, and in this one, Dorothy ends up going back to Oz. Or does she actually make it to Oz in this one? I can't remember. I do know that along the way she runs into Polychrome, who is the Rainbow's daughter, who was one of my favorite characters in the Wizard of Oz series, which I read the whole thing last year. So I'm excited to read this graphic novel adaptation. I think it's going to be a really great story. Then I also have the Shades of Magic graphic novel series set in the Darker Shades of Magic series world by V. Schwab. I was going to say earlier this year, but last year I reread the Darker Shades of Magic series in preparation for the Fragile Threads of Power, which is like the new book in a spin-off series from that. Turned out to be not as spin-off as I would like, and also like really slow and really frustrating. So that has made me less excited about this world, but I did a long time ago read at least the first one of these, maybe the second one. Is this the right order? Yeah. But I never read the third one, so I thought I'd just pick them up and read them all so I can say I've completed the series. I know I want to be doing less completionism this year, but still, we're just going to do it because graphic novels are quick reads, right? I also have one that I expect to be super quick because it turned out to be super thin, and that is Snow Glass Apples by Neil Gaiman and Colleen Doran. So this is like a Snow White retelling, but I assume with a bit of Neil Gaiman twistedness to it. And I've heard beautiful art, but I haven't opened it yet, and like I'm going to hold off on opening it just so I can experience it when I'm reading it. As well, on my iPad in front of me, I have volume 6, 7 and 8 of The Promised Neverland. So this is a manga series I've been reading about these kids at this orphanage. Something is off about the orphanage, so these kids decide they need to escape, and they're kind of trying to outwit the woman who runs this orphanage. It's very similar in feel to Death Note in that it's always this battle of wits going on. I was frustrated, I think in books 3 and 4, that they still hadn't gotten out of the orphanage and we weren't learning more about the world. However, book 5, we started getting momentum again, so I'm hopeful for these 3 This is a 20-book series and I kind of just want to blast through it, but unfortunately because I'm getting it through the library, I keep getting stuck on hold queues because the next book, volume 9, I do have a hold on that, but it's currently saying 4 weeks, so I'll read the 3 I have and then we'll continue again whenever that one comes through. I'm trying to place holds on them in advance so I'm ready, but you know, it's that game of trying to get your holds to all come through at the same time when they all have different length lists. But I'll keep playing that game. I do also have volume 2 of Monstress, and I think I could potentially get some more volumes of that. So Monstress I have read before. It's a story about this woman who is like half human, half these ancient animal gods, and she's kind of got stuck in the middle of this political war thing that's going on between different factions. I really love the series, but I currently have, I think, volume 7, volume 8, I don't know. Some volume just came out at the end of last year and I want to do a reread before I get to it. I will say, even though the art in this is beautiful, I do often struggle with the plot, but I also find every time I reread it, I understand it better. Or I remember it better. I'm not sure which one of those, but I just reread volume 1 at the start of the year and I loved my reread of that and I understood the plot so well, so I'm really hopeful that this reread is going to be the one where I actually finally properly understand things and maybe I'll even remember them. It's so hot in here, so if I'm getting shinier and shinier, that'll be why. Then lastly, the audiobook that I'm going to be reading this week is The Aeronaut's Windlass by Jim Butcher. So this is a reread for me because the sequel, it's actually behind me over here on my book trolley. It's just come out. It has been years since The Aeronaut's Windlass was released and we had started thinking maybe we would never get the sequel, but I have the sequel. However, because it's been so long since I've read that first book, I want to reread it to remember what it's about. So I'll probably tell you what it's about once I've started that reread and I actually remember, but I do remember I liked it and I do remember it had talking cats, which is a similarity it has to Monstress actually. So that's lots of things to read this week, but hopefully since most of them are short, it'll just be like a fun, relaxing time. Hello, so am I wearing the same thing as yesterday? Yes, I am, but I do feel a lot better, so that is a nice improvement. Although today we're still kind of keeping things nice and quiet, not doing too much. I am about to film a couple of videos because all the reasons why I also want to get ahead on my reading, like especially the house hunting and the potential house buying, are also things that are going to ruin my video filming, planning, editing, all my schedules basically. So I'm going to try and get ahead on that a little bit today and during the rest of the week. But anyway, let's actually talk about the things I read yesterday. So while I was basically on the couch convalescing, firstly I did read Long Chills and Case Doe. So I think yesterday I was saying this is like a dark detective story. The word I was looking for is like noir, but I always like film noir detective stories. Like it's a French word really, right? Anyway, it's that whole style and this leans very heavily into that. And the idea is that Brandon Sanderson has kind of set it in the future to make it like his character is just a quirky character who tries to be like very olden styles noir detective and everyone else thinks he's very strange because of that. It's just one of these ones where Brandon Sanderson is kind of weird and quirky and you can see that he's having a lot of fun with it, and I imagine that some people would find this really fun, and it is fun, but I guess like mostly why I got into Brandon Sanderson is for his really in-depth world building and character development and his magic systems, and of course these quirky little sci-fi mysteries don't have that. I do really like that audiobook he did with Mary Robinette Kowal, the originals, and in some ways this is similar to that, like a kind of a futuristic sci-fi thing with a bit of a mystery in it, but the world building and the sci-fi elements in that are much more interesting, and like the mystery is much more interesting. This is just so short that there's not enough substance in it to really get into that part of the story, and even though the mystery, the murder mystery that this guy's trying to solve is linked into the science of the world, because we haven't learned enough about the world, there's like no putting the pieces together to guess it. It's just like things happen. Anyway, it was fun, but probably not a favourite. I'm a little bit sad because the picture with the woman smoking and the microchip stuff coming out of the smoke, like that's not really anything to do with what happened, so it's a shame because that seemed kind of intriguing. Then I picked up Road to Oz, and this one, what I realised, honestly what I actually realised is I don't know what my hair is doing today, but what I realised with this is that the artist for this is Skottie Young, who wrote the I Hate Fairyland series, and once I realised that, I can just see it all through this. Like, it really is his style. The only thing I wish, like, I Hate Fairyland, the colours are so vibrant, and there wasn't as much vibrant colours through this, and I think if the colours had been a little bit more vibrant, I would have loved it even more. Like, you can see there is some, but a lot of it's just kind of like yellow and brown, which is a very kind of Kansas and Oz colour, but yeah, I like bright colours. But anyway, it's a lot of fun, I think, although it's hard to remember that they've changed things a little bit compared to the original story, but it still is very similar in the way the original Oz books. You can tell Frank Baum isn't really that worried about plot. He's more interested in just making like a cool world and creating some cool characters and doing like some really weird whimsical things, and this is the same as you would expect of an adaptation. Although I think actually maybe the plot in this is slightly better. Really what happens is Dorothy runs into the Shaggy Man and they go on a bit of an adventure which leads them eventually to Oz. I will say in the original books I remember thinking the Shaggy Man was quite creepy. There's a bit of alternative art at the back here with the Shaggy Man. I didn't think he was that creepy in this, and that was a much appreciated improvement. But anyway, I did enjoy this, and now, though, because this is actually a series, I think they released about 6 of these. The original series has like 15 books or something, but a lot of them are quite random and all over the place and don't really deal with the same characters. So it looks like they made about 6 of these, and I'm kind of tempted to go and read them. I do think you could probably read them in whatever order, because as I said, the plot doesn't really matter in these books. And there's some characters and some like world building elements that I would really love to see, like Skottie Young draw. So maybe I will see what my library has in the rest of this series. So I think I'm going to film some videos. Maybe this afternoon I'll edit some videos, and in my breaks from editing I will read some more books. I think next I might pick up Snow Glass Apples, just because I know it's going to be short and a quick read, and also I'm really tempted to see what the art is like. As well, I think I might pick up The Promised Neverland. Mainly, I'm going to pick that up instead of The Dark Shades, just because these are physical library books. So if I happen to come up against the library return date... Oh no, it's starting to rain. That's inconvenient. If I end up coming up against the return date, I can just return physical books late. There's no fines anymore, so it doesn't matter. But with the digital books, they'll just return themselves, because all of the Promised Neverland books have big hold queues on them. So I'll do the Promised Neverland next, I think. But so far, I'm doing pretty good at getting ahead on my Goodreads goal. I think I'm 3 books ahead. I'll put it here. And if I read a few more things today, then I'll be even more ahead.
Lazy Sunday mornings, hiding under covers. I don't mind staying in with you. Play your favorite movie, laying right beside me. I don't mind when it's just us two. That corner coffee shop we like to go. Late night walks with you to take me home. With you I never feel alone.
Hello. So if you wobble around, it's because you're on the bed, balanced precariously. As well, so it's Wednesday now, although I don't know that I've set this vlog up to align with days very well anyway. But yesterday basically we spent the morning painting the lounge. We just have a few more tasks to do to like get my house ready to sell whenever we find a new house, however long that's going to take. So we're kind of trying to finish off the biggest of those, and painting was one of those. So it's good to have got that done, but it's been so hot lately that it's just so hard, honestly so hard to do anything, and I just know that it's going to get worse and worse as the apocalypse continues. But I guess that's what that is. Anyway, I did manage to get some reading done along the way as well. Firstly, I did read Snow Glass Apples, and the art is really beautiful. I will say it's probably not my favorite art style, but it's so detailed, and there's some pages, like I think as well this page is probably quite good to represent that it's an adult book. Like it's just so beautiful, the way that it's illustrated and the way that Neil Gaiman is like writing the story as well. Like it feels very fairy tale, but also like very detailed. So basically this is a retelling of Snow White, and the character whose perspective we're getting is the evil queen, or like Snow White's stepmother, and she has fallen in love with Snow White's father, and the story just gets really dark and twisted from there. As I said, adult, just such a dark reimagining of the story, and I really loved it. And it's definitely something you could read multiple times just because the art is so detailed. I can see why so many people have said that this is great, because it really is great. I haven't always liked everything I've read by Neil Gaiman, so I was a little bit nervous that I wouldn't like this, but I don't think that it's really comparable to like his longer novels, other than maybe kind of the darker tone of things. Anyway, I really love this. I'm so glad that I read it. The other things that I read, so I did read volumes 6, 7 and 8 of The Promised Neverland, and the series is now going in such an interesting direction. Every single one of those volumes introduced something new, which, as I said, I think the early volumes I was getting bored of us just being stuck in the orphanage. Although what I've realized now is that was only 5 volumes, right? Like, what was I expecting? How was I getting bored just in 5 volumes? I think what it was is because I was reading them like a few little bits of each volume, like a few chapters at a time while I was doing other things. So each volume was still taking me several days, and so it was making each volume seem really long. Whereas if you just sit down and read a volume in one go, it doesn't feel very long at all. Like they're so quick to get through that I read all 3 of those volumes just so quick. And then because each one had this new concept, new idea, new characters, there were new things in every volume, and it's really going in such an interesting way. It's so hard to talk about that series though, because of course it's all spoilers, but it's really dark and twisted. But also we are still getting, like I think as well there was a little bit where we lost that Battle of Wits feel that I've talked about with the series. And I think in these later ones we're getting that Battle of Wits back, but like in different ways in each volume. It's really interesting. I really don't know where the series is going to go. I've still got another 12 volumes to read, so it could really go in all sorts of directions. Then what else? Oh yeah, so then as well I did start reading the graphic novel Snapdragon, because basically my sister recommended this to me. I'm only about halfway through it. So far it just seems like a really adorable and wholesome story about this young girl kind of figuring out who she is. There's other people who are bullying her for being weird, but she's making these particular connections, and it's just a nice story, basically. Very readable. I just ran out of time to finish it, but I will definitely finish that tonight. And then I guess I will start the Shades of Magic series. I don't know how long these will take me to get through. I'm not sure they're going to be as readable as some of the other graphics I've been reading. Or like, I'm not sure I'm going to fly through them as quickly. But maybe I'm just feeling bitter about my experience with the Fragile Threads of Power. Anyway, as well, I did go for a run this morning and I read, I think, about 20% of the Aeronaut's Windlass. I'm a little bit worried that I'm not making enough progress on that because I really want to finish that off so I can get to the sequel, and I've realized, like, I want to get to that sequel sooner rather than later. But again, life. I'll just have to see when I get some audiobook time. But anyway, the Aeronaut's Windlass, what I have remembered is this is set in a world where there are these spires, like giant cities, I guess, that are built up coming out of this mist, and it seems like there's monsters in the mist, and there's also these like flying ships, like ships of the sea, except they fly, and they can fly between these different spires. So one of our characters is this man who seemed to be in the army before. The Aeronauts, maybe they're called? Or is the Aeronaut just someone who flies one of these flying ships? I don't know. I haven't worked out all the terminology and the jargon yet. So there's this one man who was in the army type thing, and then he was disgraced, although it seems like maybe there's something going on with that. And now he's kind of like an independent Aeronaut. He does end up running into this monster that seems to be lurking in the back tunnels of the spire, and through that he ends up meeting these ethereals. So the people who do magic in this world are called ethereals, and they're really weird. The first one we meet is the assistant, Folly, and she is always like talking to something. What is she talking to? Who really knows? And so she's kind of like constantly observing the situation and saying like, should I say this or what should I do? But never actually saying anything directly to anyone. So she's really strange. And then as well, the main guy, we only got like a tiny bit of him, but he's so hilarious basically. I think I remember that he's got amazing magical powers, but like he can't work doorknobs properly. They just like confound him. And just the whole conversation was so absurdist, but I loved it. So the etherealists were definitely something I remember loving about the series. I also really like the cats. So the other kind of section of the story is following these different young people who are training to become guards for the, I've forgotten his name, king type person. I think, is he a duke? Anyway, these young people are training, and one of them does have this cat with her. So in this world, cats are like a completely separate civilization, and they pretty much look down on humans as lower beings to some degree. But this one cat, Raoul, really likes this girl and has come along to train with her to be in the guard. And there's some really interesting things going on about cats integrating into the human society. And I love the way that the cats are just in general. They're very cat-like in their attitudes, and it's an interesting part of the plot as well. So the etherealists and the cats, my favorite parts of the series as I remembered. Other than that, we haven't gotten too far into the plot, but I think it's going to start getting interesting because just at the end of where I got up to, there's been an attack on the spire. So chaos will ensue, I am sure. Anyway, I think I've read, since I last talked to you, 4 more things, but I think I might only be 3 things ahead because Goodreads thinks I should have read 1 thing during that time. I'm not sure. Again, I'll put it here. But in general, I'm doing very well at getting ahead on my Goodreads goal. And honestly, even though I know it doesn't matter, it just feels very satisfying.
Lazy Sunday mornings, hiding under covers. I don't mind staying in with you. Play your favorite movie, laying right beside me. I don't mind when it's just us two. That corner coffee shop we like to go. Late night walks with you to take me home. With you I never feel alone.
These little songs make me glad to call you mine, and you have got my head in the clouds.
Hello, so I have re-blued my hair, and as well I have read a few things, but not that much. Firstly, I did finish off Snapdragon. I will say that one kind of tricked me in the first half, just making out like it was going to be more of a contemporary, but there was a little bit of a fantastical element in the end, which I really liked how that all came together. Especially, I think, it's so hard to talk about because it only comes together in the first half. I feel like it's spoilers to talk about it, but I love the colors and I loved the animals, let's say. Then I decided to pick up the Darker Shade of Magic graphic novels, and to be honest, I didn't have a great time. I had read Shades of Magic before, and it was pretty much as I remembered, which is that it's really hard to follow what's going on, and the plot was even worse than I remembered, actually. Like, there's not really much of a point of anything that happens in here. It's kind of more vibes and less actual substance, which is how I felt more and more about V.E. Schwab as we've gone along. But I thought, you know, maybe they got some feedback on this one, and the second one would be better. The second one was not better. The second one I got about halfway through, and then I was thinking about how I said in my goals video that I wanted all the 1 and 2 star books that I read this year to be DNFs, and I was thinking, this is a 2-star, and so I decided not to push through it, and I DNF'd it. And I did flick through the pages to see if it changed. it didn't change. And I actually, since I had it, the third one, I flicked through the pages of that too, and I'm pretty sure it's the same. So some DNFs for the start of the year, which I did want a DNF more, so I guess we're getting that, even though it's not really what I want. What I would have wanted was to love these. So then I decided to pick up Monstress Volume 2. That, I will say, I guess similarly to this, the story is kind of hard to follow, and I don't think the story in book 2 is quite as good as book 1, but still, I feel like it's worth going through it slowly, and you can pick up on a lot of what's going on. Plus the art is really beautiful, and like I feel like the story has some depth to it, which again this did not. The other thing that I have done is got into about halfway through the Aeronaut's Windlass. I don't think I have much to say other than I'm still really enjoying the cats and the etherealists. Whenever we get some of that, it's really interesting. I will say there's quite a lot of like the politics with the aeronauts and the marines, and just some drawn out battle scenes and some other stuff going on that I feel like is more drawn out than it needs to be. So I think that's why, you know, between 20% and 50%, I don't feel like we've progressed very far, but I guess we'll see what happens next with it.
Pick it up from the top, hit restart. So far it's been so hard.
Okay, I forgot to update you last time, but I am now 10 books ahead of schedule according to Goodreads. So this vlog has been slightly successful. I will say it's already Monday and I wanted to have already finished the Aeronaut's Windlass, and I have not. So like not successful in terms of that, but in terms of getting ahead of my Goodreads goal, we've done it. So the things that I've finished since I last talked to you, firstly I read volume 2 last time I talked to you. I've now read volume 3 of Monstress and I really loved it. I actually had a look and I think the last time I reread these was in 2019. I thought it was not that long ago, but it seems like it was actually long ago. And so I really do think, and I'm sure I've said this in the past, but I really think this time I've understood a lot more, just because I've read so many more graphic novels over the last 3-4 years. And so I think I'm better at reading them now. I'm better at like following the story, because I think there's so many interesting things going on that I completely forgotten about. And maybe it's because the first time you read it, you're focused on the character journey, but this time I'm picking up on so much more about the world, and the world is so important to the plot that really is helping me a lot. So in this third volume, actually I don't think I really talked about the second volume properly last time. The second volume is mostly focused around kind of this sea journey and traveling to this island that not many people ever go to, and it's a big secret what's there. The third volume was more about this secret chamber of the Shaman Empress, which has all these scientific devices or magical devices. The difference between those is not as clear in this series, and I really like there's like these automatons, and I thought they were really interesting, even though we only get a tiny bit of them, but I really liked them, and just the way the story is being developed with the old gods is really interesting. So in the first book we have these giant ghosts of these old gods floating around in the sky, and now they're kind of starting to come back into the world. At the same time we've got this war between the ancients and the humans including the witches potentially being corrupted by the old gods. And in the middle of that, I guess, or as part of that, we have the Arcanics, who are like half human, half ancients. And we have the cats. I still really love the cats, although I think I like the cats better in the Aeronaut's Windlass, only because the cat society and cat culture is so much better developed in the Aeronaut's Windlass, and we really don't get enough of the cats in Monstress. Anyway, I am going to read volume 4 before I wrap up this vlog, so I'll probably do one more clip after I've read that, but I am enjoying my reread so much. Like, I'm understanding it so much better. It's actually amazing. And the art is still beautiful. Anyway, the other thing is, oh, is that really the only thing I finished? I think so. Anyway, the Aeronaut's Windlass. I only have about 2 hours of listening time left on the audiobook, so not really that much. I will say there are some battle scenes that I feel like are still stretched out too much, which I think I said last time. But we have gotten, in the last bit that I read, a lot more of the cats trying to do things. I love the way the cats refer to the humans as like their humans, and they just have like a very cat-like way of interacting with each other and dealing with conflict. And I love the cats. And as well, we've gotten a lot of the Etherealists. So it's kind of one of these stories where there's this war going on between different human factions, but kind of behind that is this war between different magical factions that's really driving everything. So we have the Etherealists on the good side up against this really scary Etherealist. She's scary in that she's like really dedicated to following her manners and being very polite, but at the same time will just like kill people in really awful ways. But the way that the magic is being developed is really interesting, and it's still like kind of whimsical and weird at the same time as being dark. And I think actually I will say as well, Jim Butcher wrote the Dresden Files, and I read I guess about the first half, maybe more, maybe 3/4 of the Dresden Files books that have been released so far. And wow, I hated Harry Dresden so much. He's so sexist and just annoying all the time with the way he treats women, and the whole way through that series the way that women are described is ugh. But in this one, Jim Butcher does much better in his representation of women. Like, I love Gwen. She's so abrupt and tenacious. I love Bridget. She's just like so solid and reliable. And I love Folly. She's so eccentric but also so knowledgeable. Jim Butcher doing a much better job in this series, or at least in the first book. Let's hope he doesn't ruin it in the second book. Again, I did want to be reading that second book from today, but maybe I could finish off the audiobook today and then pick up the book in the evening. Maybe I'm not too far behind my plans. Anyway, I guess the summary is that so far, not only am I getting ahead on my Goodreads goal, but I am actually enjoying a lot of the things I'm reading right now, so that's a win. Okay, so I guess it is time to wrap up this vlog. I have finished the Aeronaut's Windlass as well as Monstress Volume 4. Let's talk about Monstress Volume 4 because that's the shorter one, and I did finish it first. So Monstress Volume 4, I really liked it. I think, though, I didn't like it as much, but I couldn't really put my finger on why. And I still really loved it, and I definitely, again, feel like I understood it so much more on this reread, and I just at this point I'm doubting myself, like, am I really understanding it that much more? Like, was I really that dumb last time, or is it just that I really have forgotten everything? I honestly have no idea. Unfortunately, my library only has the first 4 volumes digitally, so I'm gonna have to request the next 3 physically to reread them, and then I already have a hold on the 8th one, which was the new release, so eventually that'll turn up, but who knows how long that's gonna take. But also, since we're gonna be going house hunting next week, actually it's this week now, a couple of days away, since we're going to be going away, this is not the time to be requesting books because they're available at the library. They'll turn up while I'm not able to get them, so I'm gonna put a pause on my Monstress reread, but I actually think that's for the best because I think if I start reading too much of it at once, it starts getting all a bit blurred and confusing again. But I am very excited to see what I will discover that I've completely forgotten or never understood in the next 3 volumes. I'm very excited for the final new volume that's going to be coming out. It's not the final one, there's still more as far as I know. Like, I have no idea how long this series is planned to be, but I feel like it has the potential to like keep going for quite a while. I don't know. Anyway, the other thing is the Aeronaut's Windlass. I have to say, the last 2 hours that I had to listen to, it was pretty much all just this big final battle scene, like this battle between these airships and the different magical people. Like, there was some etherealist stuff in there, and there was some, like, there was bits and pieces in this final big battle that was interesting, but also just too much action for me. And I think, like, in some ways, like, I think I like the world and I like the characters and I like some of the ideas, but all the stuff with the airships and the spire politics I don't like, and I feel like Jim Butcher likes those parts, which is unfortunate. because it means he doesn't spend enough time on the parts that I like. So I'm kind of conflicted because there's parts I really don't like and then parts that I really do like. I guess that makes it kind of in the middle-ish. But I guess we'll see how we go with The Olympian Affair, the sequel. I have my pile of books that I'm going to be reading in my next reading vlog over here because I'm about to start that vlog. So that one might be a little while away since we're going away and stuff, but that'll be next. Other than that, so I think in this reading vlog I ended up reading 14 things. 1, 2, 3. Didn't read this one. 4, 5. 4 Monstress ones makes 9. 3 from The Promised Neverland makes 12. Oh, and then Snapdragon. That's 13. We're still missing one. Oh, and the Aeronaut's Windlass. So that's 14 books. So now I'm very nicely ahead on my Goodreads reading goal. I think I've ended up being 11 books ahead, which I wanted to be about 10 books ahead. Basically, I could get away with not reading now for a month-ish. And that's not going to happen, but it does kind of give me some leeway. So if house hunting and house buying and moving ends up taking over my life at any point, I'm ahead of the game, so it doesn't matter. Not that it would matter anyway. Let me know, how are you going with your reading so far? I know in the Northern Hemisphere, it's kind of wintry, which I think is probably a better time for like cozying up and reading as compared to summer here where we kind of just want to go out and enjoy the sun, although actually it's been way too hot here, so we haven't wanted to, but almost too hot to do anything including reading. But let me know how you're going with your reading this year so far, and do subscribe if you haven't, if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.